Good afternoon, YouTube. It's time for another video to help you liberate your mind. And since we're in October and Halloween is fast approaching, I thought I would talk about irrational fears and phobias. So, we have to understand what a phobia is before we can talk about how we're going to release that. And a phobia is simply a trauma response. What is a trauma response? It's essentially when your brain and body goes into that fight, flight, or freeze, which most of you will be familiar with. And it's different to anxious states, right? So when you experience anxiety, that is an emotion. It's an emotional state. Whereas fight or flight, it's gone beyond that and it's gone into full-blown trauma response, which is that fight, flight, or freeze. And one of those is digital and the other is analog. So what do we mean by digital and analog? Digital means it's either on or off. It's happening or it isn't happening, right? So that would be what a trauma response is like. You can't be a little bit fight or flight. You're either in it or you're not. So if we were to use a metaphor, we would say like a light switch, you're either on or off. Anxiety, on the other hand, if you're experiencing an anxious state, then that would be analog because you don't just, that isn't just on or off. It's like a dimmer switch, right? How anxious am I feeling? The closer I get to the airport, the more anxious I become because I'm nervous about flying, right? So there is a difference between those two things, and sometimes phobias and anxious states can get confused because they do feel quite similar. Because anxiety can be quite extreme, and eventually if you go into anxiety enough, you might get fully triggered into fight or flight, all right? But some people mistake having a phobia for just being anxious about something. We can call it generalized anxiety, right? So how will you know? Well, really, if you are able to stay in the same room as that spider, but you're feeling very nervous, it's probably going to be fine. It's going to be more anxiety as opposed to fight or flight when you just cannot, you get fully triggered into that fight, flight, or freeze when you come into contact with that thing. Just like someone that has a phobia of flying, for example, if they're just very anxious on the plane, but they're still able to do that, and actually once the plane is taken off, that anxiety subsides, then it's not a phobia, right? And a phobia is full-blown, I can't get on the plane. Right, it's very extreme in that respect. So often those two things get confused, and sometimes, if not most of the time, you get both happening, right? Because if you think of the phobia or a trauma response is based on what's actually happened, that's what trauma is, right? Trauma is things that have happened that were very extremely emotional in the moment, memories that even now, if I was to think back to that thing when I saw that spider or that I came into contact with that and that incident, I still get really triggered by that right here, right now. The moment I think of it, the brain thinks it's really happening because your brain and body cannot tell the difference between imagination and reality. So your body responds to your thoughts. And that's very important for you guys to remember, because if you're thinking about things that are freaking you out, you're going to actually get your body to respond to that. If you're saying negative things to yourself, your body will respond to that. If you start picturing things in your mind that make you feel frightened, your body will respond to that as if it's really happening. So choose your thoughts carefully. So bringing it back to the trauma response, we have to release anything, or I would suppose you would call the key incidents involving whatever it is that you have a phobia of, right? So if you're afraid of spiders and you have a spider phobia, arachnophobia, then we would need to resolve and neutralize the emotions from any memories that involve spiders. And we don't necessarily need to do every single memory, because there are tools that we can use in the kind of therapy that I do that will clear all of that in one go. Or we might break it down into manageable chunks, particular episodes or memories where we experience that. But you'll find that once you've done about 3, maybe the first one, maybe the worst one, and then a more recent one, the brain then generalizes that and collapses the emotion, or releases the emotion from all of those memories so they are now neutral. It's the equivalent of taking the right Jenga blocks out of the tower and then the whole tower falls down. So that if you were to then think about those memories again, no matter what memory it is in the series, might not just be the ones you've worked on, any of those memories will now just feel neutral. There is no emotional response to those memories now, which is our measurement to tell us that the trauma and therefore the phobia has been released. All right. So that's in terms of the phobia. Anxiety, on the other hand, or anxious states, they could still be in place, right? That you might, so if we talk about doing the test and saying, so if you think back to anything that has already happened, has there been a change there? Yes, there has. But if they were to say, well, I want you to imagine that there was a spider in the next room, that could very well create new anxiety now because it hasn't happened yet. And your body, generally, the reason we get anxious is because of the things that did happen. The body says, right, we need a new mechanism to protect us from that happening again. So if the possibility of that happening, well, then we'll start to feel anxious about it. It's our body, our nervous system's way of saying, don't go near that. That is a threat. So we need to deal with the other pattern as well, the anxiety or anxious state pattern that kicks in response to this topic, this idea of spiders or arachnophobia. So we can use various tools on that. And it really doesn't take very long to resolve all of that. And I will tell you a little trick on how to do that for yourself. And you can try this yourself. And so this won't work on phobias, right? Because this is all about what you're anxious about that hasn't happened yet, which is what anxiety is. I'm projecting forward and imagining things happening, and it makes me feel anxious about the potential of that happening. Whereas phobias are things that have already happened. And when I think about that, I get a response to that. So let's imagine the phobia. This isn't a phobia. So let's imagine you get nervous about exams, or you get nervous about public speaking, or you might get nervous about being in a particular place with a certain kind of person or whatever it might be, going on dates, I don't know. So what I want you to do is use your imagination, all right? Because what we want to do is retrain the body and the nervous system to remain calm. We want to basically give it examples of this happening and convince it that it has happened and it went well, so that the body then feels, oh, it's just that thing. I've done that many times before, and therefore I don't need to feel afraid of that anymore. So you can do that simply by closing your eyes and imagining that you are going to float forward. So let's just make sure this is even safer. If you were to imagine floating, like leave your body safely where it is in the chair, and then as your eyes are closed, I want you to imagine floating up out of your body. So you're above your body now, looking down and seeing your body down there. And I want you to float into your future, whichever way that feels right to you is your future. If you were on a line of time and you're now in the present moment on that line, I want you to float towards your future in whatever direction that might be. And I want you to float past and go beyond the next time you have to do or experience that thing that makes you feel a bit nervous. So it might be a driving test. So I want you to float just beyond, or that driving lesson, about 10 minutes after you got home, and you're now floating above that. You've gone beyond it and you're looking back at that driving lesson. And I want you to imagine that it went perfectly, brilliantly, as good as it could have gone. I want you to imagine just how confident you felt and how well that went, filling in all the details about how it looked, how it sounded, how it felt, all of the little details, and really make that the best possible driving lesson it could have been. From up here, looking there, back at what's already happened. And when you feel good about that, I want you to float forwards to about 10 minutes after the next driving lesson that you have. And again, this is going to be even better now because you've got the confidence from the first one. You're now going to be even more confident, and you've gone beyond that. You're looking back and down at just how much better and how much your confidence is building, and you're getting better at this. And it just looks and sounds and feels as good as it can. And just one more time, floating forwards now, let's say it's 6 months, right? You've already passed your test. You're now driving. You do it so often, doing all these different journeys, that it's as easy and as normal as brushing your teeth. You just aren't getting worried by it anymore because you are so confident. It's such a thing that you do so often, right? And I want you to just notice how good that feels and just ramp that feeling up and really feel good about that. And as you're feeling good about that and looking down, you may even want to float a little bit higher and look back at all the different episodes of you driving leading up to that moment and see how your confidence has built more and more, and just make a really, let's just now get you to make a huge picture in front of you, a huge image of you looking confident, looking at your best in the car over there, behind the wheel of the car, and it doesn't look any better than that. And I want you to make it look so good over there on that huge, vivid image of you driving that car, so compelling, so vivid, so exciting, that you almost want to run over and jump into that. But don't. I want you to leave it just like that and open your eyes. And once you've opened your eyes, we can now do some testing. So I want you to think back, or think forwards in this case, to the prospect of going to drive a car once again, and you'll notice it feels different. And the reason it feels different is because as far as your body and mind is concerned, you have just done all of those things and it went well. So your nervous system is now relaxed in about the prospect of you having to do it again because it's used to it. So you have just retrained your nervous system to no longer perceive that particular activity as a threat. And I challenge you to try and get that old feeling back, and you'll notice you simply can't do that. Because the moment your body and brain makes a change, it's permanent. It can never be exactly the same. So there's a little tip for you. And since it is October and it's coming up to Halloween, I am happy to help anybody that has a phobia or some anxiety going on, and I can give them a major discount on that. I don't know. And I'm so confident that I would say if it doesn't work out, I can give you your money back. So I'll do 30% off, whatever, and happy to help. It's just good to be able to help people get over their fears. So if you're interested in getting some support, get in touch and we'll have a chat. Have a fantastic week.